These days, women rarely seek out the bespoke touch of a traditional tailor, for the racks of modern boutiques and glitzy shops offer more than enough variety to satisfy their endless whims. Yet, there exist certain types of garments, ethereal, rare pieces, that possess the uncanny power to render their owner soul-stirringly beautiful. Every woman feels the primal need for at least one such signature ensemble in her wardrobe. It is a garment that does more than just clothe, it enshrines and glorifies the natural beauty of its wearer. Its presence is like a band of cold, polished platinum encircling a brilliant diamond. It exists solely to accentuate and elevate the blinding, crystalline radiance of the stone. Every woman deserves a masterpiece like that. Duong TT already held the exclusive, intricate sketches from the city's most renowned fashion designer in her hands, yet she found herself forced to journey with Tan Cam and the rest of the group, driving their car deep into the heart of a remote, forgotten little town just to seek out a specific tailor. Discontent seething within her, she gripped the steering wheel tight, her voice sharp with irritation as she spoke. Why on earth must we crawl all the way to this tiny, desolate town just to find someone to cut and sew fabric? This is beyond a nuisance. Why do these so-called talented people always insist on hiding themselves away in these deep mountains and sunless valleys? It makes absolutely no sense at all. When people achieve a certain level of success, they often become a bit eccentric, Lam Kai replied, her tone dripping with the feigned wisdom of someone who had seen too much of the world. They shun society and refuse to mingle with ordinary people, and because of that stubbornness, their businesses never truly flourish or become prosperous. Tan Cam said nothing, her mind entirely consumed by thoughts of her cat. Hak Bao was her darling, her soul's treasure. No matter how breathtaking or haunting the scenery outside the car window became, it failed to draw even a flicker of interest from her. She thought to herself with a heavy heart, could it be that Hak Bao was merely a passing shadow, a fleeting traveler in the long, lonely journey of her life? The town was deathly silent, draped in a heavy, noontime lethargy. Perhaps the inhabitants were all asleep, hiding from the midday heat. Only a few children played in the deepest recesses of the narrow, twisting alleys. The sound of their footsteps drifted toward them and then ebbed away, a rhythmic let-beepy, the wet, slapping sound of feet against the ancient, sun-baked stone road. In this tiny, suffocating town, one only had to navigate a few winding corridors to reach the small, cramped tailor shop. Inside, the shop was a chaotic tapestry of hanging fabrics, strips of ghostly blues and blood reds. Scraps of cloth littered every available surface like fallen, colorful leaves, and a pair of massive, heavy iron shears sat ominously atop an antique, rusted sewing machine. Is this really the place where some hidden master resides? TT whispered, her voice laced with disbelief as she stared at the squalor before her eyes. As the door groaned open, they all looked inside. There stood a middle-aged man, his head balding and his skin darkened and weathered by years of labor. He looked honest and simple, dressed in the most ordinary, drab clothes. Was this truly the garment-making genius for whom they had traveled such a grueling distance to find? They stammered out their reasons for being there, presenting the high-fashion sketches for his inspection, but the man barely spared them a glance, looking over the designs with total indifference. My name is Ho, the man said, his voice stiff, clinical, and devoid of warmth. Before I cut a single thread or look at a drawing, let me see the fabric first. Lam Kai smirked with pride as she opened the box, carefully peeling back the protective layers of paper. As she did, she noticed the very edge of the fabric twitch and move. It looked like a hand possessed by a hidden life, reaching out as if it wanted to unfurl itself. Finally, the cloth was spread wide across the table. Mr. Ho stood frozen, as if a dark spell had been cast upon him, standing in a long, eerie silence. Lam Kai's satisfaction grew. It seemed this extraordinary, mysterious material was enough to captivate even a man like Mr. Ho, who must have grown jaded to all manners of fabric over the years. He could not tear his eyes away from it. The four of them exchanged glances and smiled, their hearts swelling with a secret, frantic joy. Mr. Ho held the fabric up, inspecting it against the dim light filtering through the door. In that glow, the cloth shimmered like the jewels on the navel of a belly dancer lost in a hypnotic trance. it possessed a malevolent, magnetic attraction that seemed to call out to the primal instincts of men. He gripped the material, sinking into a deep, brooding silence as if he were already weaving the design within the dark corners of his mind. He seemed to have forgotten they even existed in the room with him. Uncanny asked in a low whisper. "It seems he has fallen in love with that red fabric, hasn't he?" "Don't be ridiculous," the other three snapped in unison, their voices sharp in the quiet shop. Feeling disheartened and bored, Uncanny's curiosity led her toward the shadowed, darker rear of the house. Passing through a pitch-black doorway, she noticed furniture and various household items strewn haphazardly across the floor. On either side of the narrow passage were rooms made of dark wood. Because the house lacked a central skylight, the air was thick and the darkness was absolute. Still, she fumbled her way forward, driven by a strange impulse. Looking at the mundane tools of the townspeople, she felt a strange sense of alienation. Having been born into wealth and luxury, she had never stepped foot in such a place. Even the dressing table here looked alien and archaic to her. When she spotted a vanity table in the furthest small room, she was drawn to it. The room was sparsely furnished, there was only an ancient, creaking bed and a mirror coated in a thick, gray layer of dust. It looked as though no living soul had entered this space or looked into that glass in years. Noticing a small stool before the mirror, she sat down, admiring the antique piece. It was carved from heavy limb wood, beautiful and sturdy, with a perfectly circular mirror. Atop the table lay a single, old comb. Seeing that her hair was slightly disheveled from the journey, she picked up the comb and began to pull it through her locks. Her hair was magnificent inky black, glossy, and falling just to her shoulders. Since childhood, she had loved her own beauty. Seeing her reflection now, blurred and ethereal behind the veil of dust, she felt she looked incredibly seductive. She began to smile at her own image. The smile had not even fully formed on her lips when she suddenly saw a figure flicker in the mirror. Though it was only a fleeting glimpse, she recognized it instantly. It was an old woman, her back bent into a sharp, painful curve, dressed in funeral black with a white mourning cloth wrapped around her head. Her head was bowed low, her face a hidden shadow, as she shuffled through the doorway into the room. Terrified, Uncanny clutched the comb tightly. But when she spun around to face the intruder, she saw no one. She rushed toward the door to see where the woman had gone, but she was met only by a blast of icy wind that struck her face. There was no one there. She became increasingly bewildered and frightened, turning her body to flee outside. Just as she reached the door, a withered, wrinkled hand thrust out from behind the wooden doorframe. She jerked to a halt, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could not believe her eyes. Standing before her was the very woman she had seen in the mirror. The white headscarf was tied so low it completely obscured her features. The old woman began to shuffle toward her, step by agonizing, slow step. Uncanny was paralyzed with fear, her mind a blank void of terror as she stood frozen on the spot. The old woman raised her shriveled left hand toward the girl and rasped in a weak, hollow, yet demanding voice, "Give it back to me. Give it back to me." Uncanny let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream and collapsed onto the floor. Mr. Ho heard the commotion and immediately dropped the red fabric, running toward the back of the house to see what had happened. Tan-Cam and the others rushed in as well, quickly reaching down to haul the trembling, sobbing Uncanny to her feet. Mr. Ho entered the room first, speaking softly and gently to the figure. "Mother! Mother, what are you doing out here?" The old woman remained stubborn, her hand still clawing the air toward Uncanny as she hissed. "Give it back to me. Who do you think you are, you brat? Give it back to me this instant." I don't have anything," Uncanny stammered through a veil of panicked tears and heavy sobs. Tan-Cam noticed that Uncanny's hand was still convulsively waving something around. It was the comb. She took the comb from her friend's hand and asked, "Where did this come from?" Uncanny shakily placed the comb back into the hand of that terrifying old woman, then recoiled and yanked her hand back as if she had been burned. Duong Tt glared at her with annoyance. Kai tried to justify herself through her tears. I saw the mirror on the dressing table was covered in dust. I truly thought no one lived in that room anymore. My mother's eyes are not good, she is almost entirely blind and cannot see anything at all, Mr. Ho explained calmly. That is why there was a misunderstanding with Miss Luke. It is nothing to worry about. Come now, let us not crowd the hallway. Let us take Miss Luke outside so she can rest and find her composure. The group filed back into the front of the shop, and the old woman followed behind them, her movements slow, deliberate, and haunting. Returning to the cold stillness of the room, Kai slumped into a high-backed chair, her body paralyzed by an unspoken dread. The old woman remained eerily silent, her withered hands fumbling blindly through the air as she began to drag her heavy, weighted footsteps toward the darkest corner of the room. Desperate to soothe his mother's agitated spirit, Ho lifted the shimmering roll of silk, carrying it toward her as he spoke in a voice thick with forced calmness. Mother, please, just reach out and feel this. This fabric is truly magnificent. In all my years, I have never laid eyes upon a material so hauntingly beautiful. Suddenly, a voice as sharp and cold as a jagged blade sliced through the stagnant air. Put it down. Everyone in the room recoiled in shock, their eyes fixed on the hunched figure of the old woman in the corner, never expecting her to erupt with such raw, guttural fury as she shrieked again, "Put it down this instant. Drop that cloth for your mother." Ho stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs in confusion. "But why, mother? Why must I?" The old woman's head snapped upward with a sickening, audible crack, revealing a face deeply etched with wrinkles and a profound, ancient hatred. Her eyes were nothing but milk-white orbs, devoid of pupils, staring into a void yet radiating a terrifying authority. Her gaze was a silent, suffocating command, "Return it to them." The four onlookers were seized by a paralyzing dread, huddling together in the far corner of the room, realizing that the old woman before them had become something truly monstrous and terrifying. Ho spoke through a choked throat, his voice trembling with a desperate obsession. "Mother, you cannot see. You cannot possibly know how beautiful this cloth is. This material is one of a kind, a miracle of weaving. If you only let me have it, I will transform it into the most exquisite garment ever created. Please, mother, let me keep this cloth." The old woman repeated her warning, spitting out every single word with chilling precision. "Put it down. Return it to them." As the words left her lips, she began to fumble blindly once more, her gnarled fingers scraping against the walls as she shuffled her way back into the gloom of the inner room. Ho stood there, stunned and breathless, his voice trailing off into a hesitant, fearful whisper. "In all these years, my mother has never once come out here. She has never interfered with my work or my life. I cannot understand why she would do this today. It is truly, deeply strange."